my name is Paul Bisanti. I'm the first Vice President of the Brantford-Brant Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here today with Alison Macdonald of the Liberal Party of Canada. Today we're having a look at the individual federal candidates in the upcoming 2021 election, and this is the ongoing series of fireside chats with our local candidates. The Chamber of Commerce is putting on this event as part of our 2021-2022 season of Chamber TV. And Alison, we're really happy to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Alison, you've had an extensive career in law. What would you say some of the most rewarding and also some of the most challenging aspects of that professional career have given you?
Well, I would say one of the most rewarding are the colleagues that I get to work with. Even though it's adversarial, obviously, that was one of the things I realized I missed the most when the pandemic hit, was the fact I wasn't going to the courthouse anymore. And the work continues. The work is always there, whether you take a vacation, whether you're running for election, the work continues, right? The need for family and criminal lawyers is consistent. And for me, that's what for me, the most rewarding are the relationships that I have with my fellow colleagues, and realizing that I had a separate work personality and work persona that I earned on my own, that I don't share with my family, with my children, with my husband, with my friends, really. And I miss that incredibly because of the pandemic. And so despite us being on Zoom and despite our work continuing, that's been a real challenge over the last year and a half for me, because I am a people person. I like to be in person. I like to get in there. I like the action of the courthouse, and the interaction day in, day out, and the flow. Every day for me is different, which for me is very attractive, because whatever happens today, I have to get up tomorrow and do something different, but the same job again. Right. Whether you win, lose, settle, next day is a different day. In terms of challenges for my job, it's always a challenge acting for children, acting for vulnerable parents who have lost their children to a CAS intervention for whatever reasons, their personal struggles, whether it be addiction, whether it be intergenerational trauma. That's always a challenge, because I actually care, but you have to have that bubble somewhat, right? So you can't let it into your heart, but for me, I can't not allow having that empathy for my clients, for the child clients as well. And that's always going to be a challenge in developing that type of a shell, because I don't have it inherently. Inherently, I'm very empathetic and very caring at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can understand that challenge. And I think a lot of Canadians can relate to the idea of having this work persona that they have had to essentially step back from and interact with all their colleagues while on Zoom, while the kids are doing remote schooling. I think that's a challenge that a lot of Canadians can relate to. It's interesting, especially in this community, Brantford-Brant, this riding. It's not only an urban environment like Brantford or Paris or St. George or something like that, but there's also a lot of rural communities, as well as the Six Nations and the Mississaugas of the First Credit. I think this is one of the more diverse ridings in Canada right now. So with that in mind, what motivated you, Alison, to choose this time to run for office? Why this party? What about it motivated you?
Well, when I had a child, and when I was younger, I didn't take a real interest in a specific party. And as I started to get older, opened my own business, had my own office, and was working, I decided I need to make a choice. I need to choose a party. That's the responsible thing that an adult does, particularly a parent and a small business owner. And so for me, I actually was originally inspired by Sophie Gregor Trudeau, and reading about her articles she did in Chatelaine and other print materials. And she just, at the time, this is in the mid 2000s, happened to be dating Justin Trudeau, who then, as we know, his history and his background, but really it was Sophie being such a strong woman and a young woman, similar in age to me at the time and now, obviously, that motivated me to say, take a look at the Liberals. I can tell you my mother is a lifelong Liberal, and her ideology is very similar, I think, to mine overall. And in terms of the work that I do, it was really the party that makes the most sense to me over my lifetime. I have been approached, for the last couple of years by different sources to run and put my name forward. And I wasn't ready. And it wasn't for me. I really was still focused on my own career, my own family, and my son was also a little bit younger as well. So I have a 15-year-old son now. I'm just gonna have a quick sip.
Sure.
And when he's he's a little bit younger in the last couple of years in terms of the last election. So this time around, I was approached again, kind of early on in the winter, and again, just the pandemic and everything again, I declined and decided I'm not going to do this. And what really turned it around for me, and in terms of, and it's not about me, that's the other side of it that I really want to get across to people. This is not about me. I see my name on these signs, and
That must be surreal.
I appreciate people have to tick off the name and pick me as their choice, but it's really similarly as I do in my work. I'm child focused. As I live that in my life, I'm child focused, and here I'll be voter focused. So that's the other side of it. That really what turned me around were two things. I had told my son about this, and earlier in the year, this was an opportunity, an option, and had said I'm not going to do it. And he had understood and said, "Okay, Mom, that's fine." But when the unmarked graves discovery happened in early June, and really the outpouring of love and compassion and awareness amongst non-Indigenous people, for me, that was really, the turning point to reconsider.
A catalyst of sorts.
Yeah, and reconsider, and things were opening up again as well. The vaccinations, of course, were on board. I've been personally double vaccinated since April 15th. My son, obviously, he's 15. He chose to get vaccinated, but he's been fully vaccinated throughout June. The rest of my family have as well. And that really changed my mind. And, it's the unmarked graves. It's very hard to talk about, obviously, right?
Sure.
But because it's a trauma that Indigenous people have always known. They've known it's there. And in my work as a criminal lawyer in child protection, I deal with that intergenerational trauma day in, day out, with children, with parents, with grandparents, with accused, right? All of the time. And it's very evident. It is real, and it does need to be addressed. And so when I see all the Every Child Matters and this outpouring of love and support, I reconsidered and thought, if there's any time I'm going to put myself forward, now's the time.
Right.
And, I ran it by my son, and when I told him I changed my mind, he jumped in the air and he did like a fist pump and went, "Yes, awesome." And you know what? Honestly, his name's Brett. Sorry, I haven't said that.
Hi, Brett.
Yeah. And his endorsement is really the only one that I need, quite frankly, above anybody else. If my kid supports me doing this and is excited about it and says, "Way to go," then that's all that I need. That's really all the permission I needed to say this is the right thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple times you're a business owner, a small business owner.
Right.
There are many small business owners in this community. What do you think the 2 or 3 biggest challenges those business owners are facing coming out of this pandemic, if we are in fact coming out of this pandemic?
Well, I think obviously returning to the workforce and returning to in-person, right? We've had a disconnect personally, because humans we want to interact, and I want to hug you, and I want to say hello, and I want to shake people's hands, and that natural human touch, it's forbidden. And everybody has a mental health issue, I think, because of that lack of touch and lack of interaction. So that's one thing. And I think in terms of mental health, that's one of the biggest concerns that the Liberals, of course, have. It's one I have. And because we're dealing with upset, angry, frustrated, fear, people living in fear. And as we come out of things, now we're seeing that upset being in the, different protests. We're seeing people afraid to leave their homes. They're not sure about getting their children vaccinated or not, or themselves vaccinated. And is it safe? What's the science? All of those issues, to me, affect small business, because for my job, I need to meet people face to face. I really do. It doesn't matter going on Zoom, the phone. My job is not one that can be facilitated in a good way, in a productive way, without sitting down and seeing the body language in person.
Rapport is important.
Rapport is absolutely important, and much of the time, if there's a breakdown in understanding or communication, I would say 99% of the time I can bring it in if I meet with a client in person, and I can rein them in for us to be on the same page and have that, make that connection, versus it's very difficult on Zoom having that, depersonalization. So I think in terms of small business, that is a substantial hurdle and barrier that has to be overcome. Obviously, we've got, in Ontario, in any event, and then federally, I appreciate the position in terms of ensuring that everyone is vaccinated and having that proof for federal trains, airplanes, and federal workers, we're having that come into place in terms of September 22nd, right, in terms of certain indoor type gatherings where you're going to have to produce that proof. So I think the mental health really of everybody is a focus for small business, and being aware and being sensitive to the needs of your customers, the needs of yourself as the owner, and the greater kind of impact of what that's done to your business and where it's going from there. I think there's definitely money to be made. I know from the debate, and I'm going off the top of my head, that the banks in Canada essentially increased their overall income, I believe, from 15% to 18% last year. I also read an article last year that the world's billionaires, their overall revenue increased by 30% for 2020. So there's definitely money to be made. I can tell you as well, I was very fortunate to be an essential worker, given my work with in the justice system, child protection and criminal law. I never stopped. So I personally didn't take advantage of any of those programming. However, the mental health issue and not having a break, is a serious consideration. So I think it's two things, right? It's how much did you work and what was your loss, and how is that going to impact you go forward? And then similarly, did you work too much, and do you need a break?
Yeah.
And I think people like me who are a small business owner appreciate the balance that there is, and the frustration as well that people have experienced. I think also the Liberal platform in terms of the $10 a day childcare is extremely exciting. The goal of reducing overall childcare costs by 50% by the end of next year, that's very ambitious, but that assists in ensuring people can go to work, people can go back to work, people can work from home and still have their child at daycare. Even my own home, I have older children in and out of my house, but I still have to be child focused and sensitive to being at court if I'm at home and not having them hearing what's going on, right? I've had to accommodate in terms of the settings and the surroundings, the backgrounds, when kids are home or not, or where I participate by Zoom. I have an office obviously, but I have a home as well. So that's a consideration that I think people have missed, it's so hard to continue to work when you have kids running around. So I think those are, and having that change to childcare and that opportunity opening up, the additional spaces that are going to be created under the Liberal government and regime, and the intention there, that's a great way to move forward in terms of those individual people who are in small businesses, especially who don't have that corporate veil or that corporate protection where you are your business,
Yeah.
right?
So, keeping with the idea of small and medium enterprises, if you drive around town here, or if you pick up a newspaper and look at the classifieds, you'll see help wanted signs everywhere. What do you think is the next step that the federal government can take to get people back to work, or get people into those positions where maybe they're changing career paths a little bit, but making a living wage? There's employment out there, as you said. There's money to be made. What's the next step in getting that workforce back?
Well, I think that, again, I'll stress the childcare. I think that is really, really important for people. I think in terms of encouraging students and graduating students, in terms of the platform with respect to placing interest on student loans on hold, for example, for the first 5 years, I believe, of being out of school, and or once they earn $50,000, I understand, that's an incentive to me to push someone to get a real job, to be realistic about that. I think the very ambitious housing plan as well, in terms of affordability of housing, is vital in terms of people getting back out there, feeling they have a chance to own a home, buy a home, rent to own a home, for example, can save towards a first home. That's really critical. And I think obviously the vaccination, the emphasis on having a vaccine available for every Canadian who wants one is going to help push things forward. You're right. Give you that satisfaction and safety of feeling you can go out, you can leave your home, you can interact, because other people are buying into that as well and accepting the science that supports it. I think also in terms of, I guess, locally, we want to definitely remember we need public transit, and we know that the Liberals have provided for that in terms of a transportation fund already. I understand they have actually contributed to new bus purchases within Brantford itself. So, making greener transportation, more bike lines, more walkways, that emphasis on getting out and being able not necessarily to drive to work, but having that availability of transportation, I think is another focus. We maybe haven't, we don't advertise that maybe yet, but that to me is something that, in terms of younger families, youth, starting out, getting out, starting to have children, making it a reality, not a frustration. I'm not just starting out, obviously, anymore. I just started out in the early 2000s. And, I think we also have to remember our aging parents. So my parents are seniors, and they still, there's many that have independent living. They are living in their homes that they've resided in their entire lives, essentially. Their homes are paid off, but they don't want to downsize. They're not ready to do that.
Yeah.
They're still contributing, capable seniors.
Yeah.
And that also is, I think, a reality in terms of returning to work, people feeling more confident about that. I can tell you that the main reason I chose to get the vaccination, not only to be a contributing citizen for it, but to support my parents, quite frankly, so that they can continue to live their life safely and be around them, but also really for our children. Our children need to be back, need to have activities, need to be back playing sports in school, individuating as well, away from their parents. It's not normal for kids to spend this much time alone or at home with their parents. They need to be out in that social setting and individuating and growing up, because that's what being a parent to me is about. It's, raising your child to be a good citizen who doesn't need you anymore.
Right. A couple of times in there you touched on housing. You mentioned, I'd like to ask about the rent-to-own program, but you also talked about senior housing. This country, and acutely in Brantford, we're facing a housing crisis like we've never seen before. Affordability's at an all-time low. Availability of new stock is at an all-time low. Well, what would a Liberal government do to address the housing crisis in the nation and specifically here in Brantford?
So there's basically a three-prong approach to the A Home for Everyone platform position. one of which is a buyer's bill of rights. That's going to include that's going to include a right to have a home inspection, for example. That's not necessarily addressing the affordability and whatnot, but no blind bidding, no foreign ownership for 2 years, no speculation. That's to address that rising cost and the bidding wars we see that price people out of being able to purchase a home locally. We're seeing transplants. Of course, we welcome them, obviously, from Toronto, but the Toronto influx of the downsize, essentially, from Toronto to Brantford-Brant really affects our local economy as well, because it's driven up the prices. So the Liberals also have committed to building 1.4 million homes in terms of new homes as well throughout the country. There is also the housing initiative with respect to Indigenous people and creating a rural, urban, and northern groups to address those particular groups as well. And then the rent to own program, I think, is really interesting because it's, again, those entry level workers, youth workers, new graduates have that potential of renting to own a property. There's also the tax-free, tax in, tax out, $40,000 savings. And I believe there's also the proposal with respect to new tenant buyers program that can also assist in first-time home buyers saving about $30,000 per purchase, I believe. So I think the Buyer's Bill of Rights is really critical to stopping that speculation, stopping the foreign investment, trying to curb those issues we're all experiencing right now. Because I could put my house up for sale. I would have to buy a home of lesser value, technically, to move at this point. And I appreciate that for everybody. So that's a real concern of the Liberals. That's one of the main thrusts of the position. And in terms of Brantford-Brant, I'm definitely acutely aware of the housing issue and the affordability and the difficulties that people are facing. Absolutely, where you might be in jail in your own home, quite frankly, and seniors as well. If they may get a great, a good buck for their lifelong home, but to go where?
What's their option? Yeah.
Right, to go where, and that's also an issue that I'm aware of. I think it's across the board, something that you have to be in tune with, and you have to listen to what people want as well.
Yeah. So while we don't have a ton of time left, the housing crisis has its spin-off negative effects on the community, and specifically here in Brantford, we've seen homelessness lead and go hand in hand with some very significant case of opioid addictions. This is a social issue, but also a broad issue in terms of the economies of downtown businesses and things like that. How does the Liberal government try to attack the problem of the opioid crisis that's felt very much in town, but again, nationally?
Well, the Liberal government is, in terms of healthcare, obviously, and this is an issue. I mean, having the vaccinations is key, but many of my clients who are in those situations, the vulnerable people who have homelessness, who are in the tent cities, they don't have IDs. So they can't even get a vaccine, unfortunately, because they even have that issue. So I know that the platform is wanting to introduce another 7,500 doctors, nurses, healthcare workers in terms of, nationally. Locally, there is the mental health initiatives to provide funding to address those specific needs within a community. Personally, I think we need a permanent solution here in Brantford. We need permanent housing to combat the homelessness. We need a sensitivity and acceptance that people have, addictions. People that have not as fortunate as many of us, have not had an easy go at life for whatever reason, and we need to be sensitive to them and understanding. Many of them are my clients, absolutely, or children of my clients. So Absolutely, the Liberal government is there, and me being acutely aware and very tuned in and sensitive to those needs and those people. I would be that voice absolutely in a heartbeat to advocate for a permanent place here in Brantford, that has a multi approach in terms of different, different needs, doctors, all of it. We need that in one place.
So that's great to hear. The local city council has established a downtown task force. The Chamber of Commerce is a delegate member on that, as well as MPP Bauma's office, as well as currently Phil McColeman's office. The federal candidate after the election would be invited to be part of that task force as well. Would you see it as being a challenge to create time to spend time in your local riding to participate in something like the downtown task force?
I would never, ever. No, that is completely not me. I don't sleep much as it is. However, no, I would make any time available to focus on the major needs of the community and the minor needs, of course. No, I don't intend on moving to Ottawa permanently if I'm selected. I will maintain back and forth between our riding and being in Ottawa when I'm needed there, because you have to be in the community. You have to participate. How am I going to get anything done remotely? That's not, and like I said, the interaction,
right.
We need that, right? You need that to engage and be taken seriously.
Yeah. Well, Alison, it's been wonderful to sit down with you today. I'm sure we could fill up another 27-minute time slot
I know, I
very
talk too
easily. Much. No. I appreciate the opportunity that we have to give our viewers and the local business community insight into who Alison Macdonald is. We get every opportunity to see the federal leaders and to see the platform positions, and I encourage everyone to look at those. But at its core, this election is going to be who are you voting for locally. And Alison, thank you very much for coming out. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right.
It's been lovely.